48 hours to make a top-down 2D game in Unreal Engine.
Are you crazy?
Yes. I'm Rocky Mullet. I like game jams and I make 2D games in Unreal Engine. My next goal is to be part of Brackeys Game Jam 2022.2 at the end of the summer. That's still in a couple of months, so why not be part of a game jam somewhere in May? Looking at itch, there weren't really any good game jams for me. So I thought of YouTubers making challenges to make a game in 48 hours. It's simple, I just have to wait for them to contact me. Okay, never mind, I'll do my own challenge. So the idea was to make a game in 48 non-consecutive hours, within 16 days to make it roughly 3 hours per day, with a theme revealed just before the start to make it more like a game jam. I generally go into game jams with the goal of learning something, so this time I went for something not so glamorous but very important: planning. Everybody likes to complain about scope creep, and planning is the best way to avoid it. Have a finished game and not burn yourself in the process. I made a plan detailing how I would spend my time during the challenge, with a playtest at roughly the halfway point. Your games need to be done, playable from start to finish halfway into the jam, so you can spend the rest of the time polishing the heck out of it. For the theme, I asked bembrooks. They make really cool games with gorgeous art. We've been part of the same jams a couple of times, so they were the perfect candidate to find a theme that would fit my kind of jams, while still being a theme I wouldn't think of by myself. The theme they gave me was correction. And that's actually a really good theme. Almost ashamed that it was used to make only one game. What kind of game idea does that theme give you? Tell me in the comments. My first ideas were about puzzle games, having something happen on screen and having to find a single thing to correct so the puzzle works. But I somehow really didn't want to make a puzzle game. Then I thought of turn-based shooting games like Worms, Scorched Earth, or Angry Birds, where you would need to correct a shot after the first one, but couldn't think of a way to make it fun in a reasonable scope. I like puns, and I couldn't get autocorrect out of my head. So I thought of a stupid game where you would play as a teacher who wants to correct students' homework and go full on crazy to steal cars and run from the police, Grand Theft Auto style, to reach those homeworks and correct them. While I liked the pun, yeah, scope. What if autocorrect would make the player say the wrong thing and make people angry? It doesn't take much to make people angry on Twitter. You could be the mayor of a small town, selecting things to tweet, and there's always something horrible that is written instead because of autocorrect, making citizens angry. Then you'll have to fight hordes of angry citizens like you would in a zombie game. I couldn't stop laughing at the stupid things that could be written and the absurdity of bumping people around to convince them, so I knew I had my idea. Okay, 48 hours, let's do this. Once I was done fighting Unreal to make top-down 2D, I worked on the main character. I decided to do the characters very low res in the hope of saving some time. Hopefully, I won't regret that decision. I did. I made NPCs that start angry then turn nice once they are talked to, aka sent speech bubbles to the face. I made the NPCs walk toward the player. Shooting at them would now push them away. The player can dash and bump the NPCs out of the way, and perform an AoE attack that bumps the NPCs and turns them nice again. Speech bubbles now spawn collectibles that are required to do the AoE attack, and I made a ground slam animation. I made a system where NPCs would start nice and over time would look at their phone and become angry because they saw the bad tweet. That's when I started to regret making the characters so low res. It was very hard to make them look down, and the phone had to be ridiculously big to look like an actual phone. NPCs also throw tomatoes when in range, dealing damage to the player who now has health and can die and respawn. I made a simple tile set with roads, just so we have a better feel of the movement instead of just the plain green color. I implemented a camera that would interpolate and stop at level bounds, so I can start thinking about level design. I made houses who spawn extra NPCs over time, and at some point spawns a special NPC. Since it was around the time Elon Musk was talking about buying Twitter, I thought it would be funny to make a joke about the fact that we can't edit tweets on Twitter, and that the player would need to convince Elon Musk to edit the tweet for them to stop the NPCs from getting angry and eventually complete the level. I also made some avoidance on the NPCs, so they can slide off each other and off houses blocking their way. At this point, it's Friday the 13th, and I'm supposed to ask for playtesters soon, so it's time to make this fully playable. I made a win condition when Elon Musk and all the NPCs are turned nice. Flow between levels, a basic pose menu, a health animation, invincibility frames, and health collectibles when you turn NPCs with a ground slam, some water tile set, and a first real level. I made a first pass of all 4 levels, menus, controls, credits, level select, and options. Made a UI for health and mana with a different art when the player is full of mana, so it's clearer when they can do the ground slam. I added the visual feedback on the area of effect of the ground slam and the dash. I made little bodyguards for the dash, like it's the mayor's bodyguards pushing people out of the way. And I honored the dialogue system I made for Blast Bash. I also had a comeback of my good friend Crash when loading a level, that haunted me during Game Jam 2. But at least this time I knew how to fix it. We just passed the halfway point, so it's time to wrap it for playtesters. I slapped the placeholder menu explaining the Twitter part that is not done yet. Then a tutorial explaining NPC anger, gathering trust with speech bubbles, converting with a ground slam, and Elon Musk. To not overload the player with information, I only mentioned the dash as an intro dialogue of the second level. With 4 completable levels, all the mechanics except the Twitter thing, it was good enough to get valuable feedback from playtesters, so I uploaded a private version on itch and poked around for kind souls. While everybody had different points of actions, I could summarize the feedback I received in 2 main points. Elon Musk was unclear. Some people who finished the whole game didn't even know Elon Musk was physically an NPC in the crowd, so they would win without really knowing why. The game was way too easy. I'm a big advocate of making game jam games easy, cause people don't want to spend too much time on your game, but my game was so easy that it felt tedious, making the dash and the health packs kind of useless. So I decided to make a camera zoom when converting Elon Musk. I made the player walk slower and the enemies faster, so you can't just kite forever, and significantly reduced how much angry NPCs are pushed from the speech bubbles, so it slows them down but does not push them away, forcing the player to think of their positioning. There were more suggestions like having to avoid sending speech bubbles on nice NPCs, or having angry NPCs throw AoE Molotov projectiles. Would have been cool, but you know, scope. So back to work. I made a walk and talk animation, having the talk animation being a full walk cycle that I sync with the normal walk cycle, similar to what I did in Fast to sync the different sprint animations. I added texture to the grass. In the playtest build, Elon Musk would lose his mask when turned nice, making it harder to notice him. So I made extra animations for him, so he always keeps his mask. I didn't have much time left for art, since I still had the Twitter thing to do. So I first polished the house art, then I needed simple things to put in the level so it doesn't look so empty. That's when I seriously regretted making the art so low res. It was very hard to do anything convincing with so few pixels. I made a bush, a streetlight pole, trees, billboards, and boxes of tomatoes. None of this makes sense without the auto-corrected tweets. It was technically a mechanic, could have been level design, and definitely part of the flow, and all of those were supposed to be done. So I was clearly off plan. The idea was to have the player select something they want to tweet and have something different be tweeted. Like if autocorrected changed it to something bad. I wanted the player to have a choice, so they have the feeling of, hey, that's not what I said. I made a menu mimicking Twitter as if the player was the mayor logged in on Twitter. A widget for a single tweet with a sliding animation, adding 3 of those in the Twitter menu. Then I made a system of tweets that could be displayed, with a profile picture, a nickname, a Twitter handle, and text. Then the player is allowed to tweet, having to choose between 2 possible messages that would lead to an auto-corrected tweet. I would also keep what the player actually wanted to tweet, to show it in the level complete menu as if Elon Musk modified the tweet. Then I made something I definitely didn't think to plan for. Those tweets. I need to write them. They need to be interesting. The autocorrect must be funny, and a play of words with something a mayor would want to say and something terrible they could say. All that in my second language. So yeah, it took me a couple of hours, but I actually like the result. The story is that the election for the mayor happens in 4 days, giving feedback to the player how many levels there are. The first level intro makes the player tweet twice, so they understand the concept of autocorrected tweets. The following levels have the player select one tweet and actually have branching tweets responding to the player, generally a joke about what was autocorrected. Then I decided to make the end screen another Twitter sequence. Spoiler warning, I guess? The mayor is re-elected and the mayor tweets something that seems autocorrected, but still understandable. And instead of crediting myself like I usually do, I made myself tweet a final message, then made the flow go back to the main menu but on the credits page. I also made some kind of checkpoints to not redo the Twitter part every time you die and skip some parts of the tutorial. I didn't want the players to relive the frustration of the first version of Fast that didn't have any checkpoints. The game is finally complete. Let's make it better now. First, with audio. I went for my favorite music pack from Steven Melin cause he never disappoints. I picked something kind of goofy for the Twitter intro, something light-hearted for the levels and the main menu. And a more epic song for the final level. For sound effects, the Twitter had typewriting and a new tweet blue, and I made it so that when the mayor writes something autocorrected, there are random chaotic typewriter sounds to make it sound like he fails miserably. For the gameplay, the most important audio feedback was to know when the ground slam was ready, so I thought of making the mana collectible make a sound that would vary in pitch depending on how much mana you have, so the player can have an extra feedback of how close they are from fully charged, plus a sound when the attack is ready. A ground slam sound, bump, tomato throw, hurt, death, a little stinger and final cheer when completing a level. Not much time left, let's slip some polish in there. I made nice NPCs wander around, so they are not all stuck together. I polished the dialog box so it looks like a Twitter direct message from the mayor's PR. I also added the date as another reminder of the player's progression. I remade the main menu so it fits more the Twitter theme of the game. I added little Twitter profile pictures in the credits. I wanted to credit Bembrooks for the theme they gave me and credit my girlfriend for correcting my text. I added extra feedback for low HP and full mana, made an impact animation for the speech bubbles. I made upward and downward bump animations for NPCs to make it cooler to bump them in all directions. I made a delay on the bump from the ground slam relative to the distance from the player, so it feels more like a wave pushing NPCs away instead of having them all instantly react. I made a despawn animation for the dash bodyguards, added a small cooldown on the dash, I gave the player less max health but gave more health collectibles. That bush art is really ugly. I remade it. I made a final build, tested it properly and uploaded it to itch with some time left on the clock. And there I have a game made in 48 hours. If you'd like to try autocorrected, you can find the link down below. I like the experience. It forced me to think of how to be efficient with my time and make sacrifices to bring the game to completion. Might seem like I made a plan and not followed it, but the goal of planning is not to set the future in stone, but to re-evaluate the present. The point is to know what is supposed to be done and what you still need to do, to know what is your current priorities at all times. I learned that writing, just like level design, takes more time than I would have thought, and trying to save time by making low-res art actually made it harder. Hopefully it helped me grow to be ready for Brackeys Jam this summer. I'm Rocky Mullet. If you want to try my stuff, my itch page is in the description.